Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 714. My opponent kicked off with e4, and I played e5, and we get into a Ruy Lopez. By the way, I noticed that this game got some nice comments from ibarix, so I will try and address some of those as we go through the postmortem here. Let's see, we get a standard Ruy Lopez, so knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a kick, he drops back. And now, knight f6, hitting his pawn, and castles is all very standard. And now the main line closed Ruy Lopez continues with bishop to e7. The open Ruy Lopez continues with knight takes e4. And then b5, the third choice here, introduces some other ideas, not the most common ones, but still interesting. And let's see, this kicks the bishop back to b3 immediately. And then you could play bishop e7 here and sort of transpose back into the normal main lines, because typically b5 is played anyway at some point. The line I played, I'm calling that the modern Archangelsk. It's been called a number of different names, and there's no set name for it. Bishop b7 is the Archangelsk variation, and so bishop c5 is similar, so it's called the modern Archangelsk. And now I think the most challenging reply here for white is to play c3 and just go for the traditional build-up in the center that white employs in the Ruy Lopez. So I think that line presents the most challenges for black. That's what I would play as white. a4 is also a very interesting line here. Sometimes black will even sack a pawn over here because these pawns on the queen side are pretty weak. But black gets a lot of compensation in terms of piece activity in those lines, so I'm not so worried about that move. So I think c3 is the most challenging move. This move here is tricky, but it allows black to equalize pretty much. So there's relying on the center fork trick, pushing that pawn forward and forking those two pieces after giving up a piece. And the reason this works out okay for black in this particular case, sometimes this is good for white playing the center fork trick. I mean, white did get rid of my bishop and get rid of one of my center pawns. But in this particular case, black gains a tempo by playing d6 to defend his knight. He doesn't have to move the knight, and he's threatening c5 followed by c4, trapping the bishop. So white has to react to that. And c3 is the most common response. I thought I would take a look at this f4 response, though, too, because this was played against me in a tournament game. I'm just trying to remember how this goes, because this is one of my standard openings that I play in over the board games, so I want to make sure I understand the wrinkles of it. So let's look at this f4 move. It hits the knight, but black can still kick the queen with c5. And the most common move here is queen dropping back to d1. So we can look at that first. So now there's two threats. This pawn is threatening to take the knight, and this pawn is threatening to trap the bishop. So black's job here is to try and find the best way to exploit these threats. I mean, you could push right away, but it leaves you with kind of tattered pawns over here, and white gets some pawns in the center after taking the knight on e5. So knight e to d7 is the best move, and then white can continue. He doesn't have to save the bishop in this case. He can continue pushing with threats. You know, he's threatening this knight, so there's this one exchange. And then finally black eliminates the last pawn in the center, but basically gives up this knight. This knight is trapped. But notice, I mean, it's not trapped, it's pinnable and winnable. But notice that the queen can be traded, so you can't, for example, pin the knight with the rook. I would just trade queens, and then the knight would be free, and this bishop would be in trouble. So queen e2 is the move here. And then castling, just letting that knight go. Queen takes e5, c4, finally taking that bishop. And then after a couple more moves, say bishop g5, queen b6 check, we can sort of pause here and look at this position. And the material is even. There's 5 pawns for black, 5 pawns for white. Bishops are of opposite color, which may become a factor in an endgame. But, basically black has equalized. This bishop can develop nicely to b7. The rook can come in to harass the queen. These pawns are a bit weak, so that's the downside of black's position, but white is a little bit underdeveloped. It hasn't got the knight out yet. So all in all, it's a balanced position, and one I should be able to play. So let's go back. After f4, another line here, say c5, still kicking the queen. It's a very funny move. I didn't think of this idea at all. Queen to c3. Well, we saw on the other line that white was willing to give up that bishop in exchange for one of the knights. But this is kind of directly saying, take my bishop, please, because the queen has blocked the c-pawn from coming forward, so this bishop has no way out now. And now the chess engine likes to move knight e to g4 for black. It actually thinks black is better in this line, but only with this knight e g4 move, which is not one I would have thought of probably. White can continue with e5, kicking the knight, and now the other knight hops forward to e4. The queen moves away from that c3 square with a tempo, hitting this knight, which is undefended, so you defend it. Now h3, kicking this knight. And notice these knights don't have many squares to go to, so at some point black decides, right here, according to the chess engine, black decides to stop dancing around with the knights and finally take the bishop. So he gives up the knight on g4. And then the bishop goes. And then black just castles here, gets the king out of the center. And this knight was almost out of moves, right? All these squares are covered. But when, yeah, I'll stop drawing arrows, you get the idea. All those squares are covered except for the c5 square. When you push the c5 pawn forward, that gave the knight a square to go to. So it's not trappable there. In fact, the chess engine just wants to trade it off this way. Let's see, again, with queen b6, that's a move you have in all these variations, and then taking on e5. And it looks like black is better here. Let's see if we count the material. Yeah, white is a pawn up, but the pawns are kind of a mess and the king is exposed. So this looks like a good position for black, actually, but a little bit tricky to find all that stuff. Anyway, I just wanted to go over that a few times to kind of imprint those ideas in my mind in case I have to face the situation again. Anyway, my opponent went c3 here, which is the normal move. I went with c5. It's not the most common move here, but actually it's fine. I looked at it with the chess engine. It seems okay. So bishop b7, we're finally out of the opening book, but it had gotten to just a few games in any case. And yeah, it's a position which is about equal, or maybe, no, I can't say it's better for black. Actually, white makes a little mistake later, and I am better. But at this point, it's you know, black is equalized out of the opening, which is what you're trying to do. And it's an interesting position. So I will continue to play this line, I guess, is my conclusion. Let's see, he went bishop c2, I castle. He goes f4 now, kicking my knight. And I went knight to c4. I thought this was a very natural move, but this move actually is not the best here, according to the chess engine. Already, I guess, you know, this is an idea that shows up later in the game. Already, I guess I have pressure against this e-pawn that I could exploit here with knight to d7. And white actually needs to defend that pawn right away. If he doesn't, you know, I have that same idea of taking with a piece, and then when he takes back, pinning that piece and winning it back that way, and just basically winning a pawn. So knight d2 is necessary here, and then rook e8. So I just get to pile up simple development with pressure on the e-pawn. So that would be good for black, actually. So when I go knight c4, this is not as convincing. The queen could duck aside to f3, which is the chess engine's recommendation here, and then this is still in the range of about even, maybe slight edge to black. But the way he played it with queen e2, now I definitely have an advantage. I actually just win a pawn. Although, well, he plays it in a way to get the material back, so it's kind of an interesting sequence. He takes, I go for the pin, and then he equalizes the material by taking here. I take back with the knight, and then queen d3. So we can pause at this point. And actually the chess engine thinks that black is still much better. So basically a pawn up, even though I won a pawn and then he won it back, so the material is even. My advantage consists of, I just have much better development. Look at all of White's pieces on the back rank. His only piece that's out is the queen, and the problem is that my next move, Queen F6, is getting in the way of the knight. And this is a pretty good illustration of one of my weaknesses as a chess player, which is, kind of failure to take into account the whole of my position. So Queen F6 is a move I make when I'm just thinking about the queen. I'm saying, oh, what's a good square for the queen? I've got all my pieces out except for the queen and the rooks. It's time to lift the queen. And, it's good general logic, but you have to consider this move when I play queen to f6. What does that do to the other pieces? And what it does is it stifles this knight over here. So that was the comment that Ibarix made, and his suggestion was to play d5. That was actually a top engine choice, but also simply just bringing the knight back to f6 leaves black with a good advantage. Say b3 to kick my knight, and I could drop back here. He can finally start to develop his pieces, but this knight's still going to take a couple of moves to get anywhere. It's got to go back through c2 because it can't go to c4. Let's see, and I have queen c7 here, getting the queen off the back rank, preparing to bring a rook to the center. This is all good for black. Let's see, Ibarix's suggestion was d5, which is also a good move. That's one of the top engine choices as well, although it's kind of a funny sequence. So kicking the knight goes to a5, and b4, kicking it again. Knight goes back. I don't know if I would have played this way, but this is the engine line, and taking a pawn. So it seems like White has won a pawn, but it's just for a second, because queen c7 is going to get that pawn back. Queen takes d5. Now knight f6 coming out and kicking the queen. Queen goes to f3, and queen takes c5 check. Let's count. Actually, yeah, White stays up a pawn in this line, but 1, 2, yeah, because White got 2 pawns and I just got 1 back. But the pawns are kind of a mess. The pieces are still not developed, and the chess engine thinks that Black is doing great here. So, a good suggestion from Ibarix there. And a reminder to myself when I think about one piece, I shouldn't forget about the other pieces, right? It's this Queen F6 move that I played. It looks like a great move from the point of view of the queen and the rooks, but what does this piece over here think about it? Okay, enough. He kicks my knight with b3. I go knight b6. So anyway, the advantage I could have had by winning that e-pawn is sort of dissipated, and we're back in the range of more or less even. He goes knight d2. He starts to get his pieces out. Go d5, getting this going forward. Goes knight f3. Go rook a to d8. I'm preparing to push forward some more in the center. He goes knight to e5. And I went to d4. d4 is an okay move. Ibarix had a suggestion here of rook takes e5 just as a way to get my knight into the game. But, the chess engine is not impressed with this suggestion. So it's an interesting exchange sack. It equalizes the pawns because it wins. I have 6 and he has... How'd I get a pawn back? Okay, that's right. The material was even. So I get a pawn and a knight for the exchange. But what White gets now is White gets some activity. White gets bishop to f4 hitting the queen, and rook out hitting the queen again. So this is not enough. It's Black is basically just down the exchange here because White's pieces get into the game so quickly. So that one doesn't work out as well. So d4 is okay, still keeping us in the range of about even. He takes, I take, and he goes queen to c2, taking a look at my c4 pawn, and I just pushed it forward here, my c5 pawn. But the chess engine comes up with an amazing line here, so this is just interesting. Probably not the kind of thing I would have found even in a slow game, even though it's just kind of a two-mover in a way. I suppose it's something that a good player would spot. But it requires a real eye for this. So the idea is to play knight d5. And then after the queen takes the pawn, just give that pawn up and grab the f-pawn. And this is the move. So maybe you can spot the idea now. Why is knight takes f4 even a playable move? Well, the reason is if the queen takes the rook, then you have knight to knight to e2 check. So winning the queen back. And let's see. Well, I suppose we could play this out a little bit. Say queen takes, knight here check, king moves, knight takes queen, rook takes queen because this was still, and then knight takes, and this knight is hanging, and the material is equalized. So anyway, that's interesting. So after c4, not finding that clever move with knight d5, actually, well, I think it's the next move. I think it's still in the range of about even, but the tide is starting to turn. White is slowly gaining steam here. Let's see, he played g3, and I went rook e to d8. And I think at this point is where White has the advantage, starting from here. And I really overlooked White's reply. I was completely ignoring this this bishop to e3 move. So keeping that in mind, I probably should have played something like this, rook to c8. Now bishop to e3. I can just drop this rook back to the back rank, and I'm keeping this pawn under protection from the rooks. And my queen is protecting the knight. I think I might have missed that as well. Anyway, so I went rook e d8, and after bishop e3, things are starting to go downhill for me. Rook e d8. Bishop e3, and so I drop back here to protect my knight, and let's see, he went with b takes c4. Yeah, b takes c4 is actually a mistake. He should play rook a to c1, allow me to take, and then this is a position where White has activated all of his pieces, and my knight. Notice this knight that I put on h7 many moons ago is still there. It still hasn't gotten into the game. So White's better. But b takes c4 gives me a chance, and but I had to take back with the knight. And there's another suggestion from Ibarix. Taking back with the knight is really the only move here that is good for black. But it's it's hitting this bishop here, which is loose. And let's see, I think the exchange can be forced anyway. The chess engine is recommending defending the bishop. And after this exchange, then I can, after the exchange, then I can penetrate with my rook to d2. And so my strategy of doubling the rooks on the d file finally pays off in this line. I think what I was worried about here was that he might just take with the knight, and I didn't think that was going to work out well for me. But I was overlooking the skewer trick. Once again, I could play a move like rook to c8 or rook to c6 and skewer the knight and win the pawn back, win the piece back that way without giving up a pawn over here on the queen side. So that would also be good for me. So anyway, he went b takes c4. I just reflexively played b takes c4, but not a good move. And now, like I said, White is better here. Rook takes b6, queen takes c4. Yeah, White's got the pawn up and is keeping an edge. And now I finally played knight to f8 here, trying desperately to get this knight into the game. He goes rook a to d1. I went ahead and traded one pair of rooks, although this does open up my back rank. And now I play knight e6. So knight e6 is a blunder that should cost me the game. And I think I was a little bit lucky here that my opponent was starting to get into time trouble. Chess Engine is saying, well, leave that there for the moment. I mean, it shields my back rank, and go on the offensive with rook to b2. Looking at that pawn, looking at this pawn over here on the king side, maybe I can coordinate with a move like queen to h6 there on h2. Anyway, that's how I should have played it. Knight to e6 just walks into this fork. And yeah, I didn't even see that fork coming at all. He played it immediately, but the winning move here is actually queen to c8 check, securing the back rank, kicking my king out, and then knight d7. And let's see, I was thinking maybe I could block with the knight, but his rook is also on that square, so I can't block the check. Okay, so Yeah, so this fork is much more. There's no answer to this fork. I'm just losing the rook over here, or at least the exchange. But the way he played it, he did the fork first, and that allowed me to play some tricks. So I spotted this pin once again. There were a lot of pins in this game, pins and skewers. So this saves me for the moment. He plays rook to d5, defending his rook, so unpinning that knight and threatening my rook again. I go rook b1 check, goes king g2, and now rook b7 is once again a blunder. The engine is recommending queen a8. Just getting my queen out of trouble and pinning his rook. So, and the game would continue. It's not like, I think white's still a pawn up, but not necessarily winning. It still has to be proven if that's a winning advantage in the endgame. Instead, I went rook b7, and now he could win with knight to f6 check, just exposing this discovered attack on my queen. But, well, like I said, fortunately for me, he was getting into time trouble now. He played knight to c5, and that allowed me to play this move queen c7, pinning the knight again. And once again, in this position, white is better because white is a pawn up, but the position is still a game. And anyway, he ran out of time trying to find his next move right here. Actually, the next move the chess engine suggests is queen to d3, lining up for this kind of threat and unpinning the knight once again. But as I said, it's not necessarily winning. It's still just an edge for white, and the game continues. So anyway, a lot of fun in this game. Hope you guys enjoyed it and this postmortem, and I will see you again soon.